गुड इवनिंग एवरीवन। डॉक्टर मनीषा मैडम, क्या आप मुझे सुन पा रही हैं? मनीषा मैडम, आर यू एबल टू लिसन टू मी? अच्छा, ये आप बिना हेडफोन निकाल के सिस्टम से आप जुड़ने की कोशिश करिए। अब आपको आवाज आ रही है मेरी?
हाँ, अभी आवाज आ रही है।
गुड। तो मित्रों, आज हमारे साथ डॉक्टर मनीषा पाटिल मैडम। आप मुंबई के गुरु नानक कॉलेज में इंग्लिश विभाग में प्राध्यापिका हैं और टॉनी मॉरिसन के ऊपर आपका रिसर्च का काम है। मैडम, त्रिभाषा का जो पूरा मामला है, उसकी अवधारणा जो है, और ग्लोबल टू लोकल, उसकी जो पूरी हिडन पॉलिटिक्स है, उसके बारे में आज हम लोगों से बात करेंगी। तो मैं बहुत आदर और सम्मान के साथ आमंत्रित करता हूँ प्राध्यापिका डॉक्टर मनीषा पाटिल को कि वे आए और अपनी बात रखें। मैडम, प्लीज कंटिन्यू करें आप।
Thank you very much, Manisha, for inviting me for this particular lecture. Today, I will be talking on negotiating the tussle between local and global through the three-language policy in India. Unity in diversity is the motto of India, which is most spectacularly reflected in its large number of languages. Though India is not the only multilingual nation in the world, Switzerland has 3, Canada has 2, and China has 6 languages, to name a few. India's case is unique as currently around 1,653 languages are spoken in India. Plus, this multilingualism brings with it multidimensional multiculturalism as well, which is intricately interwoven with the socio-eco-political reality of India. As a result, any discussion of India's multilingual educational policy is futile without corresponding discussion of socio-eco-political reality of India's multilingualism. When we talk about language issue in India, we have to keep in mind that historically, at different points of time and for a wide range of periods, diverse parts of India were ruled by various dynasties that invaded and were invaded by each other and foreigners to establish their respective empires. Each empire and kingdom followed its own administrative policy, including official language, which was by default language of the rulers. So, during Gupta period, Sanskrit, during Mughal period, Persian, and during British period, English functioned as the official language of administration. The modern India after independence adopted the democratic form of government and sought to do away with its colonial legacy. Its first step was to replace the colonial language, that is English, with the language of people. Accordingly, the Constituent Assembly declared Hindi, that is the largest spoken language with around 42.01% of total India's population as per 1951 Census of India, as the official language, included other major languages in the 8th schedule and bestowed cultural and educational rights as fundamental right upon the linguistic minorities. However, this attempt failed to solve the multifaceted problem of language issue in India, which has so far manifested itself in the forms of conflict over national language, linguistic reorganization of states, border crisis, census of soil movement, and linguistic recognition for linguistic minorities. Constitution of India states, the official language of the Union shall be Hindi in Devanagari script. However, for a period of 15 years from the commencement of Constitution, English would continue to be used for all the official purposes of the Union for which it was being used immediately before such commencement, such as official language of communication between Union and states, official language of all proceedings in High Courts and Supreme Court, along with all orders, rules, regulations, and bylaws issued by these courts. Official language of all bills and amendments introduced in the Parliament, all acts passed by the Parliament, and all ordinances promulgated by the President, official language of central autonomous bodies such as Reserve Bank of India and Union Public Service Commission, etc. After 15 years, Hindi was supposed to replace English from all these domains. Therefore, as this period of 15 years was about to end, strong anti Hindi sentiment ran high in the non Hindi speaking states of India, especially Tamil Nadu, which witnessed violent anti Hindi agitations across the state. The replacement of English by Hindi was and is perceived as a Hindi imperialism whereby Hindi speakers are conferred with special precedence and unfair benefits as opposed to non Hindi speakers for whom Hindi is as much an alien language as English. In turn, supporters of Hindi as the national language saw and continue to see the anti Hindi agitation as the anti national movement, ignoring the genuine concern of the non Hindi states. Consequently, as a solution to the deadlock of national language, the Official Language Act 1963 provided for the continued use of English as the official language along with Hindi even after 1965. Then we come to linguistic organization of states. During British India was divided in various territorial units to bring about efficiency in colonial administration. In every unit, people spoke more than one language, which made no difference to the administration, as the official language across India was English. After independence, demand for linguistic regions became prominent as in democracy, language of the people is supposed to be the language of political transaction, bringing administration closer to the common people. However, Union government was reluctant to concede this demand as it feared that this demand for unilingual states may easily degenerate into demand for separate nations on the basis of language as it had happened in the case of religion. Yet, after the tragic death of senior Gandhian leader Sri Ramulu in hunger strike for the demand of separate Telugu speaking state, it became impossible to ignore the popular sentiments on linguistic identity. Accordingly, the State Reorganization Act 1956 paved way for the unilingual states such as Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, Gujarat, and others. Then the next problem which emerged was the border crisis. When the policy of unilingual states was implemented, there arose the practical problem of border areas. In such areas, people are bilingual. Therefore, both states claim that area and it becomes very difficult to reach a unanimous solution. For instance, Dharwad and Belgaum continue to create tension between Maharashtra and Karnataka. The next logical pitfall of unilingual state policy is nothing but the Sons of Soil movement, which claims the sole right of the natives to work on the soil of their motherland, that is, respective linguistic state, and seeks to chase away therein the aliens belonging to another linguistic community who deprive the natives their rightful economic opportunities. In Maharashtra and Assam movement in Assam are just the two spectacular examples of linguistic identities employed in the service of economic benefits. It must be highlighted that such amalgamation of economics with linguistic identity politics undermines the larger national consciousness and endangers the very unity and integrity of India. Next, we come to the linguistic recognition for linguistic minorities. As noted earlier, there are around 1,653 languages spoken in India, out of which only 22, initially only 15, major languages are recognized in the 8th schedule of the Constitution. These are the official regions, namely Assamese, Bengali, Bodo, Dogri, Gujarati, Hindi, Kannada, Kashmiri, Konkani, Maithili, Malayalam, Marathi, Manipuri, Nepali, Oriya, Punjabi, Sanskrit, Santhali, Sindhi, Tamil, Telugu, and Urdu. Needless to say, the major language of a state is imposed on the speakers of other minor languages in that state. For instance, Kannada is imposed on Tulu speakers. Furthermore, many of these minor languages are the tribal languages such as Angika, Asur, Balti, Gondi, Irula, Jarwa, Koda, Korborok, Kokru, Kurmali, Lepcha, Mizo, Mundari, Nishi, Toda, to name a few. Members of these tribal communities are often treated as subalterns in their own ancestral lands by the pan-Indian self-proclaimed nationalists. They are exploited not only socio-eco-politically but also culturally. Their languages, traditions, and cultures are looked down upon as primitive and backward. Government sponsored development schemes and projects often come often come to them packaged with the enforcement of dominant language of the region. It leaves them disadvantaged while reaping the benefits of education, employment, and other socio-eco-political systems. As a result, these language communities struggle for their separate linguistic recognition and demand to be included in the 8th schedule. While Bodo and Santhali have succeeded in becoming the scheduled languages, hundreds of others are still fighting for it. Another motive behind a particular language's inclusion in the 8th schedule is to lay the cornerstone for a new linguistic state and vice versa. The creation of Goa as a separate state and recognition of Konkani as a separate language instead of as a dialect of Marathi is a case in question. However, the practical difficulty of solving the puzzle of linguistic recognition and unilingual states lies in the threat of balkanizing India infinitely. Now we come to the three language policy. As the issue of language turned violent, government had to find some solution to it. Accordingly, in 1968, Ministry of Education, Government of India officially adopted the three language policy based on the recommendations of the Education Commission of 1964-65. Later, National Policy on Education 1986 continued with the same policy. In a nutshell, three language policy means teaching three languages to all the students in the schools. Hindi, English, and modern Indian language, preferably one of the southern languages in the Hindi speaking states, and Hindi, English, and the regional language in non Hindi speaking states. It is no doubt the most logical theoretical answer to the language question in India. However, there were and are several difficulties in its implementation. First and foremost, lack of infrastructure and shortage of competent teachers to teach a non-native language turn out to be the major hurdles in mastering a new language. For instance, in Indian schools, English is mainly taught using translation method whereby English words in the textbook are translated and explained in the pupils. Their comprehension of the subject matter is also measured through translation. In this process, hardly pupils are hardly exposed to spoken English. Here, the basic principle of language learning, that is listening as the first step of comprehending and speaking a language, is neglected, resulting in poor English speaking ability and comprehension. Secondly, linguistic identity politics adversely affects the acceptance and reception of a new language. For instance, the hubris of native Hindi speakers over the privilege of having their mother tongue as the national language has made them indifferent towards mastering either English or any other Indian language. In the Hindi states, widespread lack of interest in the effective implementation of three language policy was and is found even at the administrative level. The matter is further complicated when asserting the sole claim over Indian nationalism through a single language. Hindi speakers oppose English on one hand and disregard other Indian languages on the other hand. Consequently, the allegation of Hindi imperialism gains momentum in non Hindi states where people vehemently oppose Hindi, even at the cost of unity and integrity of the nation. Thirdly, in the tribal areas, free language policy poses yet another practical difficulty. Contrary to its ideal of imparting primary education in one's mother tongue, here pupils are forced to pursue even the primary education in an alien state language, which is not their mother tongue. They grow up speaking one tribal, that is mostly oral language at home, and studying another written language at school, grappling with an incomprehensible gap between their experience and expression. As a result, on one hand, they lag behind in the formal studies at school, and on the other hand, they develop inferiority complex regarding their language at home. Then, at the secondary level, two more alien languages are introduced, crushing their mother tongue further. Over a period of time, they start seeing their language as a lesser language and switch over to a better language. Unfortunately, at present, this is the fate of around 191 languages in India, which have become endangered languages. With the advent of globalization in 1990s, language issue in India has acquired a new dimension. Now the colonial language English has come back to us in the form of global language of science, technology and business, and India has emerged as the single largest country having highest number of people speaking English as a second language. Further, the number of English aspirants in India is increasing every year, while the number of speakers of indigenous Indian languages is dwindling day by day. Unfortunately, Indians themselves are responsible for this pitiable condition. One cannot deny the fact that Indians have not done much for the progress of their native languages in the field of modern science and technology. Similarly, focusing on the linguistic identity politics has helped little in creating lucrative economic opportunities in one's own languages. Consequently, even those who had fervently opposed English as anti-national language earlier have to accept it reluctantly as a global language today. Fortunately, free language policy comprising of local, national and global languages is still relevant in the field of education. To make it more efficient, it needs to be flexible, accommodating more number of mother tongues and adopting modern media and methodology such as audiovisual method, information and communication technology, and social media platforms. Plus, insights of socio-linguistics should be fruitfully employed to promote multilingualism as an asset rather than a liability. For this purpose, it is necessary to modernize and update Indian languages by adapting them to the changing scenario of science, technology, and business. At the same time, all the languages should be treated equally without discriminating among them on socio-eco-political grounds. Finally, it must be acknowledged that a successful language facilitates communication, and successful communication across the languages builds the bridges of understanding. Thus, free language policy is an attempt to build such bridges of understanding, and despite its limitations in implementation, it has no doubt proved to be a useful tool for negotiating the tussle between local and global in today's India. Yes, I have finished with my lecture, but if you allow, I will also like to show the PowerPoint presentation of this particular lecture so that all the points are reinforced. Is it visible? when we are discussing the language issue in India, we have discussed conflict over national language, linguistic reorganization of states, border crisis, sons of soil movement, and linguistic recognition for linguistic minorities. Next, we have discussed the three language policy, which is based on the recommendations of the Education Commission of 1964-65, then National Policy on Education 1986. The three language policy comprises of teaching three languages to all the students in the schools: Hindi, English, and modern Indian language, preferably one of southern languages in the Hindi speaking states, and Hindi, English, and the regional language in the non-Hindi speaking states. The difficulties faced in the implementation of three language policy include lack of infrastructure and shortage of competent teachers, adverse effect of linguistic identity politics on the acceptance and reception of a new language, tribal areas, 3 alien languages crush the mother tongue of the tribal children, and finally, globalization. Due to globalization, the number of English aspirants in India is increasing every year, while the number of speakers of indigenous Indian languages is dwindling day by day. Still, the relevance of three language policy is there even today because of its flexibility, need to accommodate more number of mother tongues, need to adopt modern media and technology such as audiovisual method, ICT, social media platforms, then insights of sociolinguistics, which includes promoting multilingualism as an asset rather than a liability, modernizing and updating Indian languages by adapting them to the changing scenario of science, technology, and business, and finally, treating all the languages equally without discriminating among them on socio-economic and political grounds. To conclude, I will say that a successful language facilitates communication, and successful communication across the languages builds the bridges of understanding. Three language policy is an attempt to build such bridges of understanding, and despite its limitations in implementation, it has no doubt proved to be a useful tool for negotiating the tussle between local and global in today's India. Thank you.
थैंक यू मैडम, आपका बहुत बहुत आभार। आपने हम लोगों का अनुरोध स्वीकार करके आज इस व्याख्यान के लिए आपने समय निकाला। दरअसल महाविद्यालय के हिंदी विभाग की तरफ से हम लोगों ने तय किया है कि हम लोग ह्यूमैनिटीज सोशल साइंसेज में करीब 100 से अधिक व्याख्यान हिंदी दिवस 14 सितंबर तक हम लोग करने की कोशिश करेंगे। उस श्रृंखला का ये पहला व्याख्यान था। आपका बहुत बहुत आभार। निश्चित तौर पे मुझे पूरा विश्वास है कि भविष्य में भी जब हम लोग इस तरह का कोई आयोजन करेंगे तो हमें आपका भी सहयोग इसी तरह मिलेगा, और आपके जो विचार हैं और आपका जो अध्ययन है विषय पे, उससे हमारे विद्यार्थी और हमारे शोधार्थी, हमारे मित्र जो भी हमसे जुड़े हैं वो निश्चित तौर पे लाभान्वित होंगे, और भविष्य में इसके व्यापक रूपरेखा के तहत हम लोग इसकी अच्छी चर्चा भी कर पाएंगे। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद मैडम। धन्यवाद।
धन्यवाद मनीष सर। मैं KM अग्रवाल कॉलेज के हिंदी विभाग की आभारी हूँ कि उन्होंने ये 100 लेक्चर की जो सीरीज है उसके फर्स्ट लेक्चर के लिए मुझे यहाँ पे इनवाइट किया है। थैंक यू वेरी मच।